Good afternoon and welcome to the Hertfordshire Fire Pension Board. I'm Teresa Baker, the Democratic Services Officer to the Board, and it falls to me to start the meeting as the first item on the agenda is the annual election of the Chairman. However, before I go any further, I need to make the following announcement regarding the management of the meeting. The Council will be holding this meeting electronically. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of the Board are asked to keep their microphones switched off until called to speak, and to switch their microphones off once they have finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish. If you experience connection or other technical issues, it may help to switch your camera off. Cameras should be switched on if and when speaking in the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raise hand function. Use of the meeting chat function is exclusively for voting. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should vote using the meeting chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain. The Chairman will declare the result after each vote. Breaks of at least 15 minutes will be held every 2 hours and will be taken after a speaker in the debate has finished speaking. If the Board are voting, the vote will be concluded before the break is taken. Other breaks will be incorporated as appropriate. So I'm going to ask the members of the Board to introduce themselves, including their position on the Board. So if we start with Jill Goodchild, please.
Good afternoon, I'm Jill Goodchild and I'm an employee representative on the board. Sorry, I'm wrong, employer representative on the board.
Okay, and if we can have Dan Cooper, please.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. My name's Dan Cooper. I'm an operational watch commander in the fire service, and I'm on the employee representative side of the board. Okay,
Councillor Mark Mills-Bishop.
Yes, good afternoon. Mark Mills-Bishop, councillor, employer representative.
Okay, and Darren Scotchford.
Thanks, Teresa. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, Darren Scotchford, operational firefighter with Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service, and for the next couple of minutes at least, currently the chair of this board on the employee side.
Okay, and finally Simon Toohill.
Good afternoon, everyone. Simon Toohill. I'm the Assistant Chief Fire Officer in the Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service. I sit on the board as an employer representative.
Okay, so there are no membership changes and no substitutions. So if we now start the part one business of the board. The board's chairman and vice chairman are elected annually, and the side of the board they are elected from rotates annually between them. At today's meeting, the chairman will be elected from the employer representatives and the vice chairman will be elected from the member representatives. So I call on the board to nominate an employer representative for chairman for the coming year. If members could use the chat function, please, and if somebody could please nominate. Okay, so we have Darren Scotchford nominating Councillor Mark Mills-Bishop. If somebody could second, please. If anybody to second, please, and any member of the board except for Simon Toohill can second. Okay. Jill Goodchild has seconded. Okay. Do we have any other nominations for the post of chairman? No? Okay, so Councillor Mark Mills-Bishop has been elected as chairman of the board for the next 12 months. So I'll hand over to you now, Mark.
All right, thank you, Teresa, and thank you to my colleagues on the board. Item 1B then is the election of a vice chairman of the Hertfordshire Fire Pension Board. Do we have any nominations for the position of vice chairman? If you can indicate on the chat. We've got a nomination of Darren Scotchford. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Daniel. We've got Daniel Cooper who has seconded that. Do we have any other nomination? No. All right, then Darren is duly elected Vice Chairman. Thank you, Darren, for your past 12 months. It is appreciated. All right, let's move on to item 1C, the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of October 2021. Are they agreed? Can we have an indication for, against or abstain in the chat? All right, thank you, Teresa. Those minutes are agreed. Are there any matters arising from the minutes of the 15th of October? No, I'm not hearing anything. All right, let us move on to item 2 of the agenda, the Hertfordshire Fire Pension Risk Register and the report on Q2 for 21-22, and I think we have presenting that is Rob Winterton. Is that right? Rob, are you there?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Councillor Bishop, Mills Bishop.
Over to you.
Yes, this is the first time the risk register has come to the fire board. And yes, as Councillor Mills Bishop said, it's for the quarter ending September 2021. This is a modified version of the pension fund risk register, which incorporates both the local government pension scheme and the fire pension scheme. Officers felt it was necessary to have a separate risk register presented to the fire board due to the differences between the two schemes. It does capture similar risks to the LGPS, but there are far fewer. So in this report, there are 9 current risks that have been captured against the main risk register that has 28. All future risk registers will be presented to the fire board on a quarterly basis. And a summary of the pension fund risks are shown in table 3 of the report, which is agenda pack 15. And we've also included a dashboard summary in section 4, which is agenda pack page 16. That was all I was going to really say on the risk register, and I welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Rob. Do we have any questions from anyone? We have one from Darren. Darren?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Robert. I just have one question. It relates to risk 7, and it might just be my reading of the very last sentence in the quarterly update, where it says additionally support of the memorandum of understanding from the LGA and FBU have been rescinded. Do I understand that to mean that the LGA and the FBU have rescinded that? It might just be the way that I'm reading it, but I'm not sure that is that correct?
I'm not 100% sure on that, I'm afraid. Sure if any of my colleagues are...
Darren, I think Neil Lewins can answer that one for you.
Brilliant, thank you.
Hiya. Yes, it was withdrawn by the Home Office, following the following discussions with HMRC. I think it's, but it's actually withdrawn by the Home Office rather than by the FBU and by the LGA.
Thanks, Neil. And I just wondered if I may, Chair, just to ask, it does say in there as well that there's an update due which I think obviously when the report was written, it was in the future, but now that's in the past. Is there any further information? Do we have that, or will that come to the next meeting of the board, please?
I believe the LGA issued an update to nominated representative from each FRA. I think that was on Friday. I haven't even seen that myself. So, but yeah, these are very live events, I suppose, is the polite way of saying it.
No, thank you, Neil. Thanks for the update. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Are there any other questions from anyone? Neil, I think you've got your hand up. Was that a question from you?
Sorry, that was my a lazy hand.
A lazy, right. Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. With respect to risk number 7, any updates following the announcements made last Friday will be reflected in the risk register that will be presented to the next meeting of this board.
Right, thank you.
And just to point out, that risk register refers to the quarter that end in September, so it will not capture any sort of movement since then. We can, if going to print, before going to print, we are aware of updates. We can amend the narrative in the report to reflect that. But at that particular point in time, we weren't aware of any announcement until after publication.
Right, right. Okay, any other questions? Darren, we've got one from you.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a comment, actually, more of a thank you. Obviously, this is the first time we've seen the risk register. I didn't mean to say this before I asked my first question, but I certainly, for one, have found it a really helpful document. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you for putting that together. Very useful.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Thank you, Rob, and thank you for pointing that out. Any other questions from anyone? Are pensions being paid in a timely manner? Rob?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, yes.
Right. We don't have a risk on that one then. All right. Okay. Well, if everybody is in agreement to the paper, can you indicate either for, against, or abstain in the chat room? Right. I may have put 2, Teresa. Sorry about that. All right, that is agreed. Thank you very much indeed then, Rob, for that report. Let's move on to item 3, which is the Local Pensions Partnership Administration Firefighters Pension Administration Report, Q2 21 and 22. And who have we got reporting on that one?
It's me. Thanks, Chairman. John Crowhurst from LPP.
Okay, John. I'm just turning over my. Yeah, I've got you here.
Okay,
stuff. John.
Thank you. Yeah, so I've got two items I think to update the board on. The first is the Q2 performance report, and the second is Project PACE, which we discussed last time, which is our move or change of pensions administration system. So I'll start with the performance report, and then happy to take questions on that. So performance for the period was good, covering from July until the end of September 2021. All casework was processed on time, 100%. Coming back to your question around members being paid, the report shows that there was, for where we were notified within a month of somebody retiring, they were paid within a month, which is our our core KPI and target to make sure that there's no break in payment. So that is looking good. You'll see in the report that the target for the year has just been at 50%. We are going to change that target for the fire and rescue services from April next year. So we'll be discussing what that new target looks like with officers. But when we introduced the target, we did it across both the local government scheme and the fire and rescue service, and they are very different. So we are going to look at that target again. The help desk wait times were pretty good, mostly between below the 4-minute target. There was 2 instances where the bereavement line was above the 4-minute target. We have a relatively low number of members completing our surveys, but for those that did, the satisfaction scores were good, 100% satisfied for call interactions and 100% satisfied for the retirement process. And the last thing I was just going to mention was the data quality scores. So your common data score is at 97.9% and your scheme specific conditional data score is at 97.7%. So again, good data quality there. So I'm happy to take any questions on the performance report, Chair, before I move on to the project update.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, John. We'll deal with the first part then. Any questions from anyone? Pleased to hear about the pensions being paid within the month. That is very good. I'm always keen on that. I know how members feel. Any questions before we move on to part 2? I'm not hearing anything. No? All right, John, if we move on to the PACE one then.
Yeah, thanks, John. So I'll give you another update as to where we've got to with Project PACE, which is changing our pensions administration system. So I can confirm today that the go live date for Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service is the 24th of March next year. So that is the go live date confirmed. There's been lots of activity that's been happening since the last board meeting, but if I'll give you an overview of what's been happening in December. So this month we've been carrying out end-to-end testing of the system. So that's making sure that all of the portals are working as expected, that all of the calculations are working as expected, and that the member records are updated as we expect them to for each of the individual processes that we carry out on your behalf. Our IT teams have been carrying out some penetration testing on the member and employer portals to make sure that they're secure externally. That's been happening. We've carried out a performance test across the system. So we had over 100 of our administration staff log in to the system at the same time, run calculations, run bulk processes to make sure that the system was stable and that people were not being kicked out and it wasn't falling over. And I'm glad to report that that was a successful test that happened in December. We continue to carry out parallel runs on the payroll to make sure the payroll data that's been migrated across has gone across correctly, and we continue to reconcile each of the performance reports that we're running in parallel between the two systems. On the business readiness side of the project, which is all about training, communications and engagement to stakeholders, so those stakeholders being you as an employer, you as a client and your members. Our engagement team are going to be issuing a comms plan of all of the activity that's going to be taking place between January and go live. We have agreed with Civica, who are the new system supplier, that they will support with the training activity that we deliver. Even though we've had the product for a while and obviously we've been configuring it and testing it, they know the product better than us. So we thought them supporting us with the delivery of the training was sensible and they've agreed to do that. What we will also do is give you an overview of all of the training material and collateral that will be available to members to view. So we've got some explainer videos that will be available on the website. Obviously we'll be making sure that members are clear on how they can interact with us, because we had a discussion last time about not everyone necessarily goes online. So for those people that are not going to do that, well, what else are we doing to make sure that we can make that contact with that group of members? So we're hoping that that will become clearer as we move into the new year, and obviously we'll be asking you to support us with any activity or promoting some of the things that we're trying to deliver as part of the project. Technical term from the project team, there's a hypercare plan that's being pulled together at the moment, and essentially what that is how are we going to manage queries and defects on go live. So for example, if we go live and a calculation doesn't work, what happens? What's the escalation process? What are the response times we're expecting from the supplier or from our internal IT teams? Because I think the reality is we're going to be going live with this new system working remotely. I don't think we're going to be in an office with floor walkers supporting people at their desks. It's going to be something that we manage remotely. So we're trying to plan exactly how that's going to work. That hypercare plan we do propose to share with officers so that you can see what that looks like, just so you get some assurance that the response times are going to be okay. In terms of contingency planning, obviously we're hoping that when we go live, it will be delivered well, and there won't be any service issues. But in the event that it does become a bit bumpy, we have shared with officers an overview of how we propose to work. So it's just making clear to you which work we're going to prioritise, what we're going to do to make sure that we don't breach any disclosure rules and things like that. So you're very clear on our priorities, or our proposed priorities post go live. And the last thing I'll mention on the project is just before we go live, there will be a go, no go decision making process, which includes a dashboard of activity that we'll be signing off, which includes things like making sure the data migration is checked off, that the calculations are working, that you as an employer have been trained to use the new portal, that our own teams are ready and trained to use the new system. So we've got a whole checklist that we will be sharing with you pre-go live in preparation for us going live in March next year. So I'll pause there, Chairman. Happy to take any questions on the project.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've got feedback. John, if you can turn off your right. Yep, that's better. John, thank you very much indeed for that. Just a couple of points that I had very quickly. What happens if you don't go live? You know, there is a real problem and it doesn't go live, or it's postponed. You know, what is the backup to that in order for, particularly pensions to be paid? And in terms of the promotion and communication, does that include a hotline for people they can ring into? Do we have a hotline? They were a couple of early questions I had, John.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chairman. I'll take the second one first. So our pensions help desk is available for members to contact directly. So they'll be well briefed on each go live for each client, and obviously we'll have a number of FAQs that they'll be prepared to answer. So the help desk will be available for members to contact. In terms of the contingency planning, we've got a few options. What we will be doing from a pension payroll perspective, we will continue to run the payrolls in parallel and early. So we've always got a file to make payments to pensioners in the event of a delay, which we're not expecting. For the phase 1 clients, so these are the clients that go live between the beginning of January and the end of March. There's 7 or 8 that go live. Hertfordshire County Council Local Government Pension Scheme and the Fire and Rescue Services are last. So not that we're using any client as a guinea pig, because obviously we're not, but someone's got to go first. But we're hoping that if there are any unexpected teething problems, that we're completely aware of what they are, and we've managed those well in advance of the go live for the last group of clients that go at the end of March. So I think that's where we are, because we've got so many touch points around the go no go decision making. We will know quite early on whether or not we're going to be in a position to go live, and I've been meeting with officers fairly regularly on the project to alert them to anything that you need to be aware of. But at the moment we're on on track to go live, and we're on track to go live with the clients that go live on the 2nd week of January.
Right. And for my own benefit, is the whole system going live? Is everything being transferred over?
Yes. So at the moment, we've got the core operating system, which is where we run the calculations, produce the letters. You've got a member portal at the moment that your members will access, and you've got an employer portal that you will access as an employer. All of that will change. It will become the Civica product end to end. So everything will be changing. But for us, we want to use all of the modules that Civica supply. There's lots of new functionality that will be available in the new system, some of which will be available at go live, but there's other functionality that we've taken a conscious decision not to roll out on day one, because we want to make sure that we learn about the system, we test it, and don't try and do too much with it too early. But we'll be making that quite clear to officers before we go live what that looks like.
Okay, all right, thank you, John. Are there any questions from anyone else? Yeah, Darren.
Thank you, Chair. I think you've touched on this previously, John, and it was more around actually dealing with some of the complexities around some of the pension schemes already. But with that business as usual work and the increased pressure there, this project as well, and now the Plan B rules around COVID, I just wondered if you could. It seems quite a challenge at the moment. I was just wondering if you could sort of give us some assurance. I think you've touched on it already to an extent, that you have enough resources in place to deal with everything you need to deal with in the next sort of 3 months.
Yeah, no problem at all, Darren. Yeah, so we have recruited what we've called additional resilience roles into the business. I think there was over 10 FT that were recruited a while ago and have gone through a relatively rigorous training program. Obviously, what those members of staff have been trained on are predominantly the payment cases. So they've gone into our retirements and bereavements teams because they're going to be the priority post go live anyway. And then what we've tried to do with our existing teams, because the way that we're structured at the moment is slightly different for the fire and rescue service, but generally speaking, we set up our teams so that they're experts on particular processes. So we'll have a transfers team, a retirements team, a bereavements team, and what we've tried to do is make sure that people are trained so that they can work across the team, so that we can redeploy people where we may need to. We have got a number of functions within the business. So take our risk and compliance team as an example. We have got individuals that we've identified within the business that have got pensions administration knowledge that might not necessarily be working within core operations, but could be available in the event that we need them. So I think we're okay. From a fire and rescue service perspective, we have doubled the size of the team. It is slightly different because it's quite complex, the fire scheme, as you know, and there's not a large pool of people out there that have got lots of experience. We are naturally bringing people in with some pensions knowledge, but not necessarily on the fire scheme, and having to go for a pretty rigorous training program. So I think we've done all that we can without recruiting lots of people and increasing the cost base significantly, which is that balance, I think.
No, thank you, John. That's great. And you answered my other question actually in the process of answering that one, because I was going to ask about what the priorities would be if it is a bit bumpy, but I think you covered that. So thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, no, good question, Darren. Resourcing is very important, and with COVID Plan B, I think it's very apt that we are aware of that. But I'm reassured, and well done, John. It is a bit of a complex piece of work, which you've done well, so well done. Any other questions from anyone? I'm not seeing any. John, you got your hand up. Do you want to come back?
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. Just one other point to add. When COVID did hit us, back in 2019, the pensions regulator did come out to all pension schemes and make it quite clear on what each fund, what each third-party administrator should be focusing on from a service delivery perspective. So obviously the priorities that we've set up ourselves are in line with what the pensions regulator has recommended. So just to give you some assurance that there is an external third party that have made some recommendations on this as well.
Yeah. Okay. I think Patrick wants to come back on that. Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. John and I have been having quite a lot of conversations, both from the LGPS side and the fire side, on what, as John has mentioned, what would be the priorities, and that's regardless of what's happening with COVID. It would be, we discussed what would happen if there was operational issues from go live date. Now, the introduction of any new system, and particularly a system that the LPPA are introducing to replace 5 current systems, is quite a big logistical exercise, and there is going to be a learning curve for those officers that are going to be using that new system. So we identified early what we would prioritise in the event of any sort of downtime, officers not being familiar with systems. What would they prioritise? And that would be pensions in payment, dealing with deaths in service and prioritising the payment of those death grants and survivors' pensions. And the pensions committee, which has oversight of the relationship with LPPA, supported by this board and the LGPS, have been also getting regular updates, and this discussion has taken place with the committee as well. So we're all familiar now with what would be prioritised in the event of any downturn in what we'd call SLA, the service level agreement, and performance against KPI targets. So John and I have also agreed that in the event of anything happening like this, where there was any sort of interruption to business, we would relax the SLA on certain pieces of work, but the priority would be on those key ones. So hopefully that gives you as a board assurance that yes, officers from the administration side have been quite clearly engaged with John and his colleagues in the project management of this, and discussing the data integrity and how that's being transitioned across from one system to another, and the security of that data, because that data contains individuals' dates of birth, addresses, national insurance numbers. So that was the big challenge that we put to John. First, we wanted assurances around how that's been handled, and we've had from the LGPS side our actuary involved in this, who are very clued up on data. For that's what they need for doing their particular piece of work, doing valuations, and they've been quite satisfied that what John and the team at the LPPA are doing has been managed in the correct fashion. That's all I was going to say, Chairman.
Yeah, and I think, Patrick, if there are problems, then this particular board will be informed in a timely way, and you know, either through report or verbally. Is that right?
Correct. If there was any potential interruption to service delivery which would impact members, I would ensure that members of the board, both the LGPS and Fire Board and the Pensions Committee, would be made aware of this as soon as possible. And that would take place outside a formal committee board meeting. Yeah,
and I mean, and through this board and this medium, you know, it's reassuring pensioners that we are, you know, fully behind them and on top of any situation that might arise through early problems, if you like.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, number one priority are the pensioners, and that must always be in our mind. All right.
Yeah, correct.
Go on.
No, I was just going to say the priority is the pension fund, or the Fire Board scheme, is there to pay pensions to pensioners and for fire officers who are about to go into retirement, to ensure that they get their pensions as soon as they retire on day one. And so that's our key priority, always has been as an administering authority, and also making sure those pension payments are correct. It's all very well putting a pension into payment, but if it's not the correct value, then it's not worth worth what it's written on paper. So we make sure that those calculations are correct as well, and those integrity checks that John talked about, the data, those conditional data scores, that's really important. So when you hear John talk about data scores in 95, 97, that is a really high scores for data integrity. That means they're ticking boxes with respect to the data we hold for those individuals.
Yeah, no, absolutely correct, Patrick. Otherwise, we all might get a hose down, and we don't want that if it's not right. All right.
Certainly not.
All right. Any other questions from anyone? Look, John, fantastic bit of work. Good luck, and you know, I think I speak on behalf of everybody. You've done well. You've done well.
Thank you, Chairman.
No, all right. If we can all vote for, against, or abstain in relation to the report in the chat room. Yep. Okay, thank you, Teresa. That report is agreed. Well done, thank you. And we move on to item 4, report on age discrimination and immediate detriment. And I think we have, is that Rachel?
It is, yes, afternoon.
All right.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Rachel. Off you go.
Okay, so this report is just to kind of inform the board about the process to remove age discrimination in the fire scheme, and also the council's decisions on how it's been treating immediate detriment cases. So the background, the MacLeod Sargent case came about after the 2015 pension reforms, and it ruled that the transitional protections that were given to firefighters based on age were unlawful, and the government said that it would remove the discrimination. So the period which needs to be fixed where that discrimination occurred was between the 1st of April 2015 and the 31st of March 2022. And to be in scope of the remedy, you would have had to have been in pensionable service on or before the 31st of March 2012, and also on or after the 1st of April 2015. So the government's consulted and published its response on how it's going to remove the discrimination, and that will take place in 2 parts. So the first part's perspective, so from the 1st of April 2022, anybody who was still fully protected and in the old legacy scheme, so that's the 1992 scheme or the 2006 scheme, they'll be moved into the 2015 scheme from the 1st of April 2022. And then retrospectively, when people come to retire, they will then have the choice, which is called a deferred choice underpin, a DCU. And they'd be presented with 2 options. So the old legacy benefits or the reform benefits for that remedy period, and an individual firefighter will then be able to choose which of those benefits they'd like to take. And that will be implemented by October 23. I think that's when the legislation is expected to be able to do that. So kind of concurrently running alongside that, a few things have been happening. So there was the immediate detriment note. So after the court case, the tribunal then kind of ruled that anybody who was affected and had brought the claims was entitled to be treated as if they were still in the 1992 scheme. However, we didn't really have any guidance on how to do that, and eventually the Home Office did release some guidance on how we could process cases, but it wasn't very detailed. There were quite a few concerns raised about it, so at that time HCC decided that it wouldn't be processing immediate detriment cases using that guidance. However, a bit later, the Home Office did revise its guidance, and it did publish. It was a bit more detailed on the areas where we'd had concerns, And the HCC scheme manager made the decision at that point that we would use the guidance to process immediate detriment cases, but it would be limited to the few kind of cases where the guidance allowed. So, for example, it wouldn't be for retired firefighters or people with contribution holidays. So this was communicated out to firefighters at the beginning of August that we would be processing limited immediate detriment cases, and it kind of just briefly described a few situations where we would be able to process it and where we wouldn't, and that we would require 3 months notice period for LPPA because it was all manual processing, and that they would need to sign a waiver to say that they were agreeing that we were processing it outside of legislation, and that their case would be revisited once the final legislation was in place. And we processed 5 cases since the 1st of November under immediate detriment. Back in February, the FBU, there was a couple of court cases against Nottingham and London fire authorities. There were some retired firefighters who wanted to have their pension under the old legacy schemes under immediate detriment, and the LGA, supported by all of the other fire authorities, were working with the FBU to try and come up with a national framework to how to process these cases. So we were all doing it consistently and not just relying on the government guidance, which didn't cover off all cases. And in October, the Local Government Association and the Fire Brigade Union, the FBU, they issued a joint statement of memorandum of understanding, which did provide an agreed framework on how we could process immediate detriment cases. So like I just said before, the framework was a bit more detailed than the Home Office guidance. It did allow for retirees to be processed. We would be able to process people who would otherwise have had a contribution holiday. There were some instructions regarding tapering, and it would allow us to produce estimates as well, which we weren't able to do under the guidance. And HCC was considering whether to adopt the MOU. And during those considerations, the Home Office then withdrew its immediate detriment guidance. That happened at the end of November. So we had to stop processing any cases that we were still doing under the Home Office guidance because that had been withdrawn. And we have paused the decision on whether HCC is going to adopt the MOU until we have a bit more clarification on how the withdrawal of the guidance is going to affect the MOU. And as said before, it's kind of a bit of an update. There has been some further information that's been sent to the legal nominated contact on Friday, which is still with the legal department at the moment. So once that's been received, we need to consider that in light of the MOU, and HCC will need to make a decision on whether it's going to adopt the MOU and communicate that out to firefighters. But at the moment, it's on pause, any processing.
And Rachel, if you turn off your mic, Rachel, sorry, I was going to ask a question. Yeah, and how long will that take, do you think?
I don't know. I suppose it depends what's in the guidance that's come through from the LGA's solicitors. It's been sent to our legal department, so they need to digest it and then send it to HR and the scheme manager. Yeah,
I mean, it has the potential of dragging on for a long time, and that's the last thing that we actually want. How many cases are we dealing with in Hertfordshire?
I believe we had 77 potential immediate detriment cases, which was up until October 23. Right. And there were possibly a further 22 retired cases.
Right. And are we in contact, communication with all those 99? Do a quick count.
We haven't sent any communications to the retired firefighters as yet, which we would do once a decision was taken on the MOU. And right. There will be we have sent communications out to all active firefighters. That was back, and there are some more communications due to go out to them.
Yeah. Again, I think communication is very important, and we ought to, again, have that as a priority. All right, thank you very much indeed, Rachel. Any questions from anyone? No? All right, well, thank you, Rachel. Presumably we will get an update report at our next meeting in March. All right then, thank you for the report, Rachel. If we can vote for the report, for, against or abstain in the chat box. Okay, yeah, thank you, Teresa. That is agreed. Okay, with my date of future meetings, we've got two. Is that right, Rachel? Sorry, Teresa. 22nd of March next year and the 20th of July, both at 10 AM. Is that correct?
That's currently correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. All right, there are no other part one business then, and we don't have anything in part two. So unless Teresa tells me otherwise, thank you very much indeed, everyone, for attending. I hope you have a very good, safe Christmas. I know some of you may be working or on standby or call out, but I do wish you a very good, safe time at Christmas. So, and well done, and thank you for your work. All right, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.